herself.
You do introductions first, or are you on?
We can do those after.
Okay.
Before we jump into Q&A. People can
Okay.
give their intro and ask their question.
Okay. So thank you so much for being here. I've been doing some work with Katie, and she asked me to do this, and I'm thrilled. I'm definitely passionate about getting more people into local government, or frankly, government at any level, volunteer or elected. So I'll give you a little background on myself. I grew up actually in Maryland, which was the #1 reason I thought I would never be in local politics. When I moved to Massachusetts, I thought if you are not born and bred in Massachusetts, then you are not going to be part of Massachusetts government. That changed, and I'll kind of go into how I saw that evolve, at least in my town. But I was always super involved in student government in high school, and just always loved organizing, came from a pretty political family. I remember visiting Boston when I was probably 8 or 9, and going to the Kennedy Museum, and I had a Kennedy poster in my room there on after, and I was determined to go to Peace Corps because I loved Kennedy. And so when I graduated from my undergraduate degree, which I did at American University in DC, which further kind of steeped me into the government world, I did international studies there and public communications as well. I fulfilled my lifelong dream and I went off to Peace Corps. I was in the Dominican Republic for 2+ years, living along the Haitian border on the northwest corner of the Dominican Republic, in an area that looked nothing like the tropics, super dry and no electricity and no running water. And I really learned a lot there. In fact, that's how I ended up getting into energy. I was actually hitchhiking one day out of my little community, and an American picked me up on a motorcycle, and I never saw Americans up there. And it turned out he was working in a solar energy project to bring electricity to off-grid rural areas of the Dominican Republic. And I got to know him and worked with him for a number of years. And when I actually left Peace Corps, I stayed in the Dominican Republic for 2 years, working on this, what they call solar-based rural electrification, working with entrepreneurs on how to put in solar panels and working with local nonprofits on how to finance them through microfinance programs. So that was the start of my energy. Came back to the United States, got my MBA at Boston University, worked for about 20 years in very large renewable power companies, 2 of the largest publicly traded companies in the world, Enel Green Power out of Italy and Brookfield out of Toronto, Canada, and then started my own business in 2016, I guess. And we all know what happened in 2016. And I had started to get, well, essentially what happened in 2015, I left Brookfield. I was traveling 4 days a week to Canada, working out of their Toronto office. No time to think about anything. I had 2 kids who were preteens, I guess, at that point, and I wasn't paying attention to local politics at all. But between kind of changing jobs, starting my own company is what I did in 2016, and what happened with the national election, I started paying attention. And earlier that year, I started working with a friend who was running for school committee and just helped her get organized, and I loved it, and I started to learn about it. And the following year, a friend encouraged me to run for town council, and I'm sure I said no many, many times. Actually, at that point, it was called the Board of Selectmen. And I will give you, I think we're all women on this. There's there's been a lot of research on women running for office, and maybe you can just raise your hand if you know, but so how many times do you have to ask the average man to run for office? And he'll say yes. Any idea? Yep, 1 time. And do you know how many times you have to, on average, ask a woman to run for office? Yep, it's like 7. Yep. 7 or 8. Yeah, you guys, you've heard this before. Do you know what age the average man is asked to, or actually, do you know what age the average man runs for office? 20, somebody says 35, 22. The average man runs, and the average woman runs for office at age 40. So I think there's a lot of women out there, and this is all from the Barbara Lee Foundation. She's here locally. It's awesome. She has great research. Women are just much more reticent to run. They don't think they have the experience, kind of the same old thing we go through in our careers, self-doubt and imposter syndrome. And I have a good friend here who I serve with on the town council, who was the first female Muslim leader elected to local government in Massachusetts. And she's super involved in Emerge, which I know Katie is familiar with. And she just really encouraged me to run and kind of helped me through it all, and was an amazing, incredible mentor. And I'm a little unusual in that I hadn't run for anything before going for kind of the top board in my town. And that actually caused lots of backlash, especially I think as a woman, because it was, well, you need to serve your time in school committee, or you need to serve your time on an appointed board. And I really felt like, I had done the PTO stuff. I had done all the stuff that kind of women do. I had coached softball, coached basketball, and I didn't want to be on the school committee. It wasn't where my passion was. I really am passionate about, probably from my renewable energy career, I'm passionate about environment, and I thought I could get the most done either on town council, or we have a municipal electric utility. I'm in Wakefield, Massachusetts. We have a municipal electric utility. Quite frankly, that's where I thought I would end up. That's my love, is electricity. But I have a very good friend who was running for that board. She was the first woman ever elected to the Wakefield Municipal Light Board. And so I kind of went for town council and ran a really hard campaign against an incumbent. There were actually 4 of us in for 2 seats, 2 incumbents and 2 newcomers. I topped the ticket, which a lot of people seem to care about. It means I got the most votes. I worked really, really hard. And I'm happy to answer kind of process questions on campaigns, because I think they're fascinating and there's an art to them. And I'm happy to answer the questions like, how much did it cost and how much time did it take? I mean, I was lucky in that I had my own company. It hadn't quite taken off yet. I had some free time. I had a lot of flexibility. I had kids who were in high school by that point, who were a little more independent. I had a supportive husband. And I will tell you, I probably loved the campaign more than I liked the governing, to be quite honest. A lot of people really love governing more than they love the campaign. I think because I do public relations and communications for work, it was just kind of like running your own PR campaign, really. But I've enjoyed the work too, and I really have felt like I've gotten some things done. Interesting. So when I ran for selectman because we had not changed the name yet. Now in Massachusetts, almost not all, but the majority of the boards have either changed their name from selectman to select board, and you become a member of the select board. We're one of the few towns, at least, that has changed the name to town council. So it gets a little confusing because people confuse us with the town lawyers, or people think that councilors are always cities. But I say I was the last person to run for selectman and the first person to be sworn in as a councilor. So that was pretty exciting. And I'm back up for re-election. So that was 3 years ago. I'm back. It's a 3-year term. I'm back up for re-election right now. So far, nobody has, we still have a few weeks for people to pull papers, but nobody's pulled papers. We have one person who's not running, so there is somebody new running for his seat. So we'll see how it goes. I think the COVID campaign would be very different than the campaign I ran 3 years ago, because you can't, I spend a lot of time knocking on doors and doing things like that. I think it's going to be very, very different, and I am ready to run that kind of campaign if I have to. And I actually hope somebody runs against me. I'm actually not a believer that government is good if incumbents keep in. So that's where I am now. Have I missed anything, Katie?
No, that was great. I
So
actually,
weird to talk about yourself without any.
as someone who used to work on campaigns, I have not even considered what it would be like to run a campaign during a pandemic. So that just set my mind racing.
It's been an interesting dynamic because some people think it's going to be easier to run. Like it might be, I don't think it will. It's funny, the woman who's running for the other spot on town council right now has never wanted to run again because she's terrified of knocking on doors. And I think the reason she's in right now is because she knows nobody's going to force her, you know, kind of from the political establishment and those of us that know, to force her to go knock on doors. So I think there are a few people who are in because they feel like they can get away without knocking on doors. I think in general, if you're not an incumbent, it's going to be a lot harder to get your name out there. It's going to take a lot more money because you're going to have to do mailers if you want to reach people. So I don't know. We actually didn't have a contested council race last year either. So it may just be that people are happy with the way things are going, or, you know, this is a completely volunteer job. Quite honestly, there's a lot of privilege to be able to do this job completely as a volunteer. And so I think we have a lot of qualified people out there who would do this if there's some compensation to it and would do it well. But I think that also limits people, which is unfortunate.
Definitely. So I guess I'll kick things off. I'm Katie. I'm in my second year with Junior League. I was born and raised in Arlington, Mass. And then I now live in Boston. I'm interested in politics. I worked in politics right out of college. I worked for first the local Massachusetts Women's Political Caucus. I did a lot of work with Emerge Massachusetts, which I'm sure Julie can tell you all more about. And then I worked on congressional races for the year 2018 midterms. After the end of the midterms, I was very burnt out. I had worked 90 hours a week for about 10 months straight. And I actually got an offer from now Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign. And I just clenched up and thought, oh my God, I can't imagine doing 90-hour weeks for another year and a half. So I pivoted, I left politics. I went into business for myself and now I'm in marketing, but I'm still really passionate about getting more women involved, especially in local government, because I think that's where you can have the biggest impact right away. So Anastasia, you're right below me. So let's go around and then we'll do Sarah and Miriam.
Awesome, thank you. My name is Anastasia. I think I'm in my third year of the league. I currently am the charity gala committee chair. In terms of like attending this, I attended because I just know that whatever town, wherever I end up, you know, really settling my roots and everything, I do want to get involved. So I'm not sure what that looks like. I know, I mean, what you just said, you hold an entire position and it's completely volunteer. So just kind of wanted to learn about how sustainable it is and you know, the path that gets someone there, and you know, for different levels of involvement as well, whether it's PTO or as big as select women. So definitely interested in learning about that.
Sarah, I think you're next.
I did not expect to be seen tonight. I was going to hide behind my image completely. Welcome, Julie. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Sarah Manigo, and I am on the advocacy and DEI committees for the Junior League this year. And we are currently standing up our first public affairs program. I don't know if you were aware of that. So we are super excited to have women like you come in and speak to us this year because you're helping us kick off. You're helping us, you know, really build up our energy and our inspiration to start advocating for more, you know, of our key issues, and of course encouraging more of our sisters like you to go into politics and to, you know, be the next leaders. So that's why I'm here.
That's exciting. That's congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And
Am I next? I think. Okay. It's all.
No, it keeps moving around on me too.
I was like, I'm trying to follow, but it's not going the same pattern. I'm Miriam Stevens. I have been in the league, multiple junior leagues, 2 junior leagues from Minneapolis to Boston, a total of 10 years. So pretty old on the timeline. And I am Junior League of Boston's VP of Development. So looking at how do we get money, which has been fun this year. I work for Wayfair and I live in Boston, the South End. I moved here almost a year and a half ago from Minneapolis, but I'm originally from Florida. I attended this one in all transparency because this is the only one of the series that actually fits on my calendar. However, I'm attending these series of events in general because I'm just fascinated by people who balance between a volunteer position and as well as maybe manage family life or other commitments, work. I think that's just a huge commitment for any woman leader, and understand a little bit more about how that's managed is fascinating to me.
Awesome. Thank you all for indulging me in that introduction exercise. So, I mean, I have some questions. I don't know if anyone else has questions. I think the way we decided is just to use like the little reactions button to kind of like raise your hand if you have a question. You can also just stick it in the chat and I'd be happy to read it out if you don't want to. But I mean, I can kick things off. Julie, I know you talked about how much you loved campaigning. Yeah, what was one important aspect of a campaign that you wish you had known the first time around that you're applying this time around? Obviously, COVID's thrown a bit of a wrench in things, but what's like one thing that you learned that you're like, oh, if someone had told me that from day one, my life would have been easier?
Oh, no, I think it's knocking on doors really scares people. And I think what I didn't quite appreciate, and it was a good thing that I found out, is that if you're doing a campaign very focused, so I mean, local campaigns are not partisan in Massachusetts. You don't run as a Democrat, at least in towns. You don't run as a Democrat, you don't run as a Republican. But I am a Democrat, and you can pay for what's called Vote Builder, which is an amazing database of voters. And it costs like $600 for the town that's my size, so I would just get that. And so then I was able to really target. So I only went to doors of people I knew were either Democrat or unenrolled, and if they were unenrolled, they kind of voted Democrat in the last 3 or 4 elections. And you can dice and slice it. Do they vote in those local elections? You know, how do they vote when they vote in presidential elections? So you can really, so you end up going to doors of people who are kind of like-minded, and more importantly, people who care about voting. And so one thing that I think people don't quite appreciate is, and if you can't afford that, you can get that same kind of list from your town clerk for almost free or far less money. You just kind of have to do the dicing and the slicing yourself. So you get a report from maybe the last 3 local elections, and you merge them all together and figured out who. But it makes a huge difference to go to doors of people who care about, and people who pay attention to local elections. They want to talk to somebody, and so they'll talk. You know, you knock on the door and they'll talk to you. When I knocked on doors, the selectman name change was going to be on the ballot. It was going to be at the next town meeting, and some people were upset about it, and some people weren't. Some wanted to talk about that. Some wants to talk about their potholes and their road. Some, you know, just kind of want to learn about you. Some don't care at all, and you just hand them your materials and you say thank you. But people were in general very, very appreciative of that. And so that's kind of that background is taking the time to figure out what doors you're going to. It feels very awkward to walk by, you know, go to one house, walk by 5 houses, and go to another house because you know those 2 are voters. And I do have my colleague who I mentioned, Marine, who's kind of my mentor. She got a little pushback because she would walk by houses and people would be like, why aren't you coming to my house? But they weren't on her list. So I was always I knew her story from a few years before me. I was always very careful that if somebody was out or I saw them in the windows, I went to their house anyway. You know, if there's little kids looking out the window and they wonder what you're doing, then I would still kind of go. Or if somebody was walking their dogs, I would hand them and talk to them. So it wasn't like I was ignoring people, but it means you can hit more houses, and you hit the houses of the people who are going to vote. Because voting, I believe voting is a muscle, and once you've exercised it a few times, you do it. But there's a lot of people. I mean, in Wakefield, we're a town of 25,000 people. About 18,000 are registered, and it on a lucky day, voting day, 15% of that. Very low. And so you can't spend your time on 18,000. You have to spend your time. Votes are decided by a couple hundred votes, and you know pretty much in town who the 1,000 or 2,000 voters are going to be. So that's a long answer to that. Then I just wouldn't be afraid of, I mean, I think you have to be a pretty gregarious person to go out and do that kind of campaigning. I know a lot of people who aren't, and they do campaigning a little differently. We, in pre-COVID days, we did a lot of meet and greets. So people would hold maybe, you know, like an evening gathering of their friends, and we'd have some cookies and wine sometimes. I'm a huge gingerbread baker. I love baking and decorating gingerbread cookies. So my thing was to make gingerbread cookies and take them to all these houses with the big J. And I made it's on my Facebook page, but I have a Massachusetts cookie cutter, and I would always put a little star right where Wakefield is. And that's what everybody would get kind of when I was out doing things, or that's what I would take to the senior center. So that's kind of become my thing. I haven't cooked once since cookies. So that's a little bit of that answer. Yeah.
So, you know, I love that you're so gregarious. I would love to be like that. I cannot imagine going to 2,000 houses and doing what you do. And I find that to be so impressive. Now, how are you going to change things now that we have the pandemic? I mean, are you going to do more open houses via Zoom? How are you going to handle this?
That is my plan, is to do Zoom. I was one of the first counselors to do office hours after I was elected. And so I would go to in pre-COVID days, I would go to the library once a month and put it on my website and sit there for 2 hours. And somebody would, I literally have never had office hours that somebody hasn't come by and talked to me and I've learned something. So when COVID hit, I went to FaceTime Live. I did a few Zoom. I've gotten a little bit away from it. I did do them at the library a few weeks ago and it was freezing. I do not like, I say I grew up in Maryland. I lived in the Dominican Republic. I'm still not sure how I got this far north. But in general, my plan would be, if I do have a very competitive race, my plan will be to reach out to all those people who did the meet and greet in person for me and just set up Zoom calls and probably, I don't even know whether maybe deliver things to people who are signed up or just talk. So I think that's going to be it. I'm also just going to, I would try to raise money and make sure that I at least do one mailer so that I hit everybody who's on that list. I haven't bought Vote Builder this time. If I don't have a competitive race, I feel like with COVID, it's very uncomfortable to ask people for money. Who said they were the development person? It's super uncomfortable to ask people for money if I don't really need it. So I haven't started really collecting money. We'll know after March 5th if I have a competitor, in which case I will start fundraising. But at this point, I'm hoping not to have to.
I ask a question on
Yeah.
that? Since it's been tough asking people for money and just also making people feel like they're getting their money's worth. I think they're easier to make an ask in person. Obviously, all of our events are, as Anastasia well knows, our gala has been postponed and moved, and now it's gonna be virtual. And so anticipating that's going to be a challenge to get the same amount of funding that we're used to, because your people are not going to be dressing up and going to have a full sit down dinner. And
yeah,
just wondering, like, have you heard of anything that's been working? What is working? What are some things that you are thinking of? I mean, I think every nonprofit is probably in a similar situation, that, it's desperate times kind of thing. So definitely interested in hearing your perspective there.
I tell you, I mean, aside from campaigning, the best event I've been to was Conservation Law Foundation did a gala, and I've never been to their galas before, so I didn't do it pre-COVID. My company ended up sponsoring it because I've been doing a lot of work kind of in their area, but and I mean, I don't know even know what platform, but they put us in, so I still got to invite my 4 people, like it was a table, and we were put in with some other people in a little pre-chat thing. And then, but then at the end of the table type thing, they had actually pre-recorded a very brief award ceremony, and they were honoring this photographer, and then they had this like really incredible photography show after it. So I don't know whether that's helpful or not.
Can you explain more about the photography show?
Yeah, look it on their website. I'm sure it's on their website. I think it's clf.org, Conservation Law Foundation. They just put together this, and it was all, so I think it was on YouTube. So basically we all just got off. It wasn't like, oh, let's switch to another room and drone on. And I think there's something to be said for these pre-recorded things that don't drone on and on, to be quite honest. And I don't know whether they like commission music, but they put like his photography show to music, and it was incredible. It was all like environmental things, and so they knew their audience. But it was really great. And like I've gone back and we all talked about it, and I went back and I looked at it, and maybe there's something like that. I don't know. I mean, for campaign,
that's interesting.
Yeah. So look at what they've done. They are and they sent us all this like kit of out of here, like super, it was environmental, like a little cork thing that said conservation.
Like a goodie bag, basically, like almost like they shipped you.
Yeah, like they sent us the stuff for drinks that you had to add your own alcohol. They didn't send us the alcohol. And it was kind of cute. It was, I mean, I'm sure it was a lot of work.
Did you feel like it was still a valuable use of your time, worth the money? Okay.
I really did. I really did. And I think when you sponsor something like that, it's less about the event and more, you really believe in what they're doing and you want to support them. And I'm sure you have people who feel the same. We've done so much good work for so long. Hopefully people come around. A side job I do is work at a women's shelter in Boston, and they actually are raising more money now than ever before. I think just because people are really
resonating with certain, it's definitely something, and I'm sure you do in your campaigning too, is making sure you're communicating the issues and how their money is going to be, benefiting the community and benefiting like them as well. So that's something, definitely have to think about.
Yeah, and the few people who have, because I have a website and it has a donate button on it, and people are donating to me completely unsolicited. Normally we would do the campaign, we would do a big kickoff, get all together, get an alcohol permit and have some beer and wine, and that's when you raise all your money. I don't know whether I'll do a kick. Again, it's going to depend how competitive it is. But I do have some people giving me money, and my response to them is thank you. I mean, I'm not giving it back, and that I'm really trying, I will let them know how I use it because I want to use it responsibly. And if I don't for some reason use it, then I'll just recycle it back into the community somehow. That's a great thing about campaign accounts is there's a lot of bureaucracy around it. You have to make sure you follow mostly state laws. You can, I can use it over my 3-year term to, give to when we do wreaths on veterans' graves, for example. Use it to do things like that. So yeah, it's about communicating. I'm even afraid to buy signs right now. I mean, if I don't have a competitor, and I'm an environmentalist too, so it kind of drives me crazy to buy those plasticky signs. And I feel like everybody's in a lawn sign war these days. But yeah, so we'll see. Good luck. I don't know. These galas are tough. These fundraisers are super tough. But you've done good work, and hopefully you can find that it resonates with people.
Julie, you mentioned following state laws. If someone's running for office for the first time, what are some resources, or what did you find most helpful in learning all those rules that they have to follow for, raising money?
So what happens, you first, kind of the process of running, and I think it's the same, at least in all towns and probably cities in Massachusetts, is you go to the town clerk's office, there's a certain day, and we call it pull papers. So you say, I want to run, and you sign something, and you have to get, here we have to get 50 signatures. And so when we do that, there's a packet of information that the town clerk gives you. It's one of those that looks like it's been photocopied like 500 times over 20 years. But it lists basically it's the Office of Campaign OCPF, Office of Finance. Tell me, OCPF. I don't know. It's the Office of Campaign Finance.
Election and campaign finance.
Election and campaign finance, I bet it is. You see that? And so they have all of the information about fundraising and managing your money. If you're going to solicit money from any third parties, you have to set up a campaign account, which means you need an employer identification number and a bank account. You need a designated treasurer. And then you have to report your finances annually. And then during the campaign, we'll report them 1 month before the election to the day and 1 month after the election to the day. The other kind of important thing to know from campaign finance is if you work for the state in any capacity, you cannot solicit or collect money yourself. So if you're a teacher, so the woman whose campaign I helped run for school committee, she's a guidance counselor in the Andover public school system, so she could not do any of her own fundraising. So she could go to these fundraisers and she could talk about how great she is, but I was the one who had to physically take the money. If it was sent to my house, it was my address on the account, all of that. So it does get a little trickier if you are a state employee. It's not impossible, you just have to be super careful. So that's one resource. And then there's like Emerge, Katie, which you talked about, which is a great group of a great program that trains women to run for office. I actually did a little training on the Democratic, the National Democratic Committee has a campaign education institute, I think it's called, which had some pretty good templates. It's worth getting on their list if you're interested. And the year I ran, the State Democratic Committee also did a training up in Lowell. And I know they're going to try to bring that back post-COVID. So there are definitely resources. And I got good advice. I just went and I mean, part of it was courtesy, but I learned a lot as I talked to all the existing, sitting selectmen, some selectmen who were just well-known from past years in town. The town manager sat down and talked to me, and they all give me little tips. The only thing Katie, you asked before, but I wish I'd known, I had my kickoff with beer and wine in the local civic center, which was technically you're not allowed to have political events in town buildings, but this was under management privately at the time, even though it is a town building. So everybody did it. I was worried about it, but everybody did it. But I never pulled a liquor license. I had no idea. So here I'm on town council, which manages liquor licenses for the whole town. We're the liquor authority. And I completely had a party with liquor and no permit. I got a note from the town manager the next week saying, yeah, you need to come pull your liquor license. So that could have sunk me, honestly. That could have sunk me, but people were looking out. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Lynn. We are just
Hi, sorry.
no worries. We're just going around doing a little Q&A with Julie about, women in municipal government. So feel free to either use the reaction button to raise your hand or toss a question in the chat. It looks like Sarah put a question in the chat. What was the title of the Democrat program?
Let's see.
DNC.
I think it was the DNC. I'm pretty sure it's like a campaign training institute. Are you Googling it? I'm sure it'll come up. And that's the other thing, we were talking about money. I ended up setting up there's a platform called Act Blue, which you have to be a Democrat to use, but does make collecting money a lot easier. Train Democrats, yeah, that's right. And again, I know what I do is not a partisan. Oh, that's good too. Best practices. There's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of Facebook pages. I think there's one like, you know, women running. I forget. I'm also a jogger runner. So it's so funny. I'm on all these like running for office and running Facebook pages. So I get them all mixed up. But there's some great Facebook groups. It's kind of women supporting women across the country, and there's good topics there. I think you do have to set up a website. Websites are pretty easy to set up these days using Wix. I think that's something that's going to be more important in this COVID world. Is going to be websites. Since you can't get out. I had a guy call me the other day who's running for planning board, which is not a big committee, but we actually have a race, believe it or not, a competitive race for planning board. And he said, "What should I do?" And I said, "You need a website." He had one up by the end of the day. I think you also have to use your social media a little more. You know, the guy who's running for planning he's like a city planner. And I said, well, then people are going to go to your LinkedIn, and his LinkedIn wasn't up to date. I said, you need to get your LinkedIn up to date. Like, I know, I know. And he did. By the end of the day, he had it up to date. But yeah, I don't know. You have to think of those things. And you have to clean your social media if it's not, it's not appropriate. I think mine was mostly appropriate. I mean, I think the best advice I got when I was running too was like, make sure your family's on board, because it takes a big toll. Like, I don't, it's a big balancing act. It takes a toll on your family. Stop with that question, Phil. Oh, what's the best way you found in communicating current projects? That's a really good question. And how much money did I use? With my own money. I raised $8,000, and I think I still have a loan to myself for another like $1,500. So I probably in the end put in $1,500 to $2,000 on my own and raised the rest. And I think I had $65 in my account. So I have started raising a little more. I was lucky. I had family that did it. I find that local donations tend to be the $50 to $100. You don't get big. That's big, but I used my outside network too. I used my LinkedIn and corporate network. I'm a member of, I never did the Emerge program, but I know that they're super supportive. I did a program called the Environmental Leadership Program, which has a couple thousand national fellows across the country, and we have a really big listserv. A lot of them are very, very supportive, and I ran very much on an environment and sustainability platform. So I think that's probably the average, at least for my level, like low, kind of what we call down ticket positions, school committee down to like planning or board of assessors. We have a board of health that's elected here in Wakefield. They don't raise that kind of money. So it's not by no means is it absolutely necessary. Like I said, I was running against a pretty entrenched incumbent that I would to be. How's the best way I found of communicating current projects? So I do use social media. I don't love social media. I do it for work. Katie, actually, I had to hire Katie to do it for me. I was sick of it. So Katie does my social media for my clients. I've actually now started using, I know Katie uses the Hootsuite. I use this thing called Loomly, where I can just go on and schedule one. So I can schedule something across all my platforms. So I use Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. I don't do anything on LinkedIn for politics now, other than ask for money. So every 3 years. But I also I've kept my website up the whole 3 years. A lot of people kind of let their websites die. I kept my website up. I refreshed it. I use a blog on it. And I do send at least twice a year, I send email blasts. I'm really careful about curating my email list. If somebody, we had a collective bargaining contract negotiation with our teachers 8-9 months ago, and they all, even though the town council has no vote in it, they blasted us emails, and I put every single one of those people on my email list. So if somebody sends me something, even if you're complaining, you're going on my email list. We have a big fight right now going on over our high school logo, which is a warrior Indian disturbing logo, but it's very divisive, and I have people emailing me, and all of them went on my email list this week. So, and you know, and I do use constant contact so that they can unsubscribe if they want to. But I, you know, I have 600-700 people on my email list at this point. I've kept it going. So that's how I communicate. And I try to make myself accessible. People can call me, people can email me. I'm always behind on something. There's no balancing. Like, this whole balancing stuff is BS. There's half the time you're behind and you just try to make it work.
Julie, do you find like constituents emailing you is the best way for people to reach their local town representatives? I mean, you know, obviously in a pre-COVID world, we would have like town meetings that people can physically
Right.
go to. But if someone has an issue that they want to bring up with their local representatives, like, what have you found is the best way for them to communicate?
Definitely emails, and never be shy to like send another one a week later and say, hey, you didn't get back to me. I really try to get back to people. I think I'm pretty good compared to others, but I would never, you know, we actually did not have town emails when I started. Everything was going to people's private emails, and I actually asked them to set up town emails. So that not only does it protect me and that I can use it, and people, but it keeps everything in one place and it's discoverable if somebody needs it. So yeah, it's I know it seems like a no-brainer, but it wasn't. So I won't say that things don't still come to my private email, which I do have to use for campaign. So you have to use your private email for campaign and for fundraising. But I do try to use my official town council, town of Wakefield email for most things. So if things come there, it's, you know, it's more responsive. So hopefully your towns, if you are advocating for something, you can go on and find an email. The other way is, I am a big believer, every public committee, every town-run committee has meetings that have to be publicly posted by law, 78 hours, 72 hours before the meeting. And every public meeting is supposed to have public participation. And so I am, if somebody comes to me with a problem and, you know, it's kind of something that I think needs light, right? Sunshine on it, then I will often say, you know, look, you should come and talk to the town council about this. And now we're all on Zoom, which actually I think is really helping public engagement and dialogue. I was really pushing for recorded meetings before COVID happened, and it just got accelerated, and I had a lot of pushback. There's a law in Massachusetts where you can participate remotely if you're sick or you're out of town. There's all these rules about it, and I was getting a lot of resistance to it, but now I don't think we'll ever go back, luckily. So the great thing is there's public participation, and so if you're not getting responses that you want locally, or you think it's an issue that more people care about, by all means, you know, ask. I think you get 3 minutes at the beginning of meetings to talk about your issue. Now, the council doesn't have to engage with you. The committee doesn't have to engage. It's not a back and forth, but they have to listen to you, and most often then they'll put it on a future agenda. So I think it's an underutilized public way to get attention to issues.
Nice. Anastasia, looks like you have your hand raised.
Oh, I just had a question about how you balance your select woman responsibilities with your own life.
Not well.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky that I have my own business. So that gives me a fair amount of flexibility, though I'm not a very good person at saying no. I'm vice chair right now of the council, so if I win, I'll be chair next year. I'm really trying to figure out now with my colleagues, like, we all know what our passion projects are. And so I'm really trying, if somebody comes to me and they're upset about an affordable housing issue or a dog park issue or a roads issue, you know, I know enough about those. I mean, we got a couple of people who are really deep into the budget. So I try now, and when I'm chair next year, I'm going to really try to institute this more, is that we listen, but then we suggest that they go to the person who's kind of that subject matter expert. And so that's one way, just on that bucket, that I'm trying to not take on a million things. You know, I'm kind of known as the environmental person. So if somebody has a compost issue to another counselor, then it ends up with me. Or I started a big kind of grassroots bicycle group. So if it's bike lanes, then that comes to me. But I'm trying to really get to the point where, you know, this is very interesting. I really think Counselor so-and-so would be interested in this. And then I'll follow up. So that's how I'm trying to balance, because it is a lot of, you know, road things and a lot of things. Not that I'm not interested in it, because it does all matter, but I feel like we have we're 7. We're one of the biggest select boards in the state of Massachusetts for a town our size. So in a way, we're lucky, because we have 7 people who can take on 7 different issues, and we're pretty diverse. In terms of balancing it with everything else, my husband's gotten involved in town. You know, he's now on the permanent building, and so he kind of, I think, enjoys being part of that. My kids don't care what I do anymore anyway. I've got one who's a sophomore at UMass Amherst and finally back at school, although he's quarantined in his room. And I have a daughter who's a senior in high school and always with her boyfriend. So that's I do have colleagues who do it. Like I have a guy on our, he has 4 kids under like 10. I don't know. And he has an amazing wife, but she's also like an immigration lawyer, and he's in healthcare, and it's crazy. It takes a lot of work, but I think it's worth it. But like I said at the beginning, it's also privilege, right? I mean, if you have to work there's a lot of privilege to this, and which keeps a lot of diversity, unfortunately, you know, economic diversity, all kinds of diversity out of this. And I think that is something that sooner or later we're going to have to deal with, even if it's just like a stipend to help cover costs, because you also have to go to all the school plays, and you have to go to, you have to play the Wakefield Educational Foundation's spelling bee or go to the trivia nights. And so not that it's super expensive, but it takes time and it takes money. And so it's always a balancing act. I'm not sure I could have done this if I weren't in business for myself and didn't have a super supportive family. But I'm glad that I've gotten the opportunity to do it. I think I said in the beginning, I never thought I would, because I didn't grow up here. And Wakefield's one of these towns where, like, if you weren't born in Wakefield, you're not from Wakefield. Lynn's laughing, like she's like, I know this town. Where are you from, Lynn?
I'm from New Jersey, but I work for state government. And so trust me, I understand all of this.
I appreciate your nod.
Yes.
I grew up in Arlington, but my parents didn't grow up in Arlington. So I'm
like, that's how I really thought Wakefield is still a lot like that. Like, this whole mascot thing we're dealing with.
I actually had a friend who ran for, I think it was state rep in Southie, and he, like, born, bred, spent his entire life in Southie. His parents live in Southie, his grandparents live in Southie, and because when he was starting his career, he moved to Salem for like 3 years. They've like hammered his opponent in for state rep, hammered him for being like not Southie enough.
Yeah, there's some of that. And they're very loud, kind of the local, like, are you from here? No, I'm not. My thing was, no, but Wakefield has been a really important part of my family. My kids are from here. The truth is that all these towns are changing. And I think, you know, the vocal ones are like that. There's some of the kind of the old school, but there's so many. Wakefield's about 8 miles north of Boston. We're slowly becoming kind of, as people are moving out. I moved here from Arlington. My husband and I lived in Arlington, couldn't afford to buy in Arlington, moved a little further out. I think, you know, kind of the Boston area is getting broader and more diverse. And I'm super excited for Wakefield to start kind of taking on some of the diversity and culture of Somervilles and Maldens and Arlingtons. So, but there's a lot of people who, you know, still are living in
Boston,
so, what's that?
especially now that people don't necessarily have to commute to Boston.
Exactly.
More people
Exactly.
move further away.
Yeah. I always actually wanted to go back to it, but I always was like, oh, I'm in the burbs. As soon as my kids are gone, I'm going back to Boston. But now I feel like, you know, we're on the commuter rail. I feel like maybe like I can live in Wakefield on the commuter rail. We're doing a lot of smart group type things, get down to one car and still kind of feel like I have Boston. So, but my vision for Wakefield is not everybody's vision. And there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of balancing to do there. So.
And our, well, at least Cambridge's Border Cafe just closed.
Oh,
So you guys have the only Border Cafe left. So I feel
yeah.
I love that.
One.
It's Saugus, but it's close enough to Wakefield. But
closer.
like that is probably my favorite. Like all of the best stuff is there. The like Breakheart Reservation and Kelly's Roast Beef and Border Cafe and like it's amazing. So I think you picked a good neighborhood.
I think it's great. And I love all the smart growth and I love, you know, it's been a great neighborhood. And so, yeah, so I never thought I could run because I wasn't from here. And then, so my friend Maureen won the year before and she was from Linfield, which although it's not far from Wakefield is like a million miles away culturally. Big houses and very, very conservative. And she won, and she won as a Muslim in Wakefield. And the guy who won the same year that she won was a conservative. I think, yeah, I mean, everybody knows he's a homosexual, but we didn't make a big deal out of it. But he was, you know, basically two really not from here. He was from New York, different sexual orientation, different kind of politics, and you know, and my friend Anne, for school committee, is a lesbian. So we had like 3 completely outside the box people win the year before I ran, and I was, this is doable. Yeah, this is definitely doable. So it was fun.
We just have a few minutes left. I think we slated like about an hour for this.
Okay.
But I mean, if anyone has any other questions, feel free to jump in. Julie, I have one. I feel like I should know the answer to this. Is town selectmen, town council, unpaid just a Wakefield thing, or is that like all towns in Massachusetts?
It's not, I don't know what the data is on it. The Massachusetts Municipal Association may know more. Melrose, a little bit to our south, they're a city, and I think they get a small stipend. But I think most small town selectmen are volunteer. We only have 2 paid elected positions in Wakefield, the town clerk and she's not an accountant, I guess she's the tax collector. Those are the only 2 paid. Our municipal light department used to get paid and then had like insurance covered, but they just did away with that. It kind of was caught up in the whole pension system to some extent. So yeah. I don't know very many people who do. I don't know anybody who does this for the money, even if they do this. I mean, honestly, I don't even know how the state reps do it for the money and the senators. I mean, it's a lot of work. Which is why, you know, everybody who villainizes politicians, you know, I mean, really, they are public servants. I mean, I realize that not all are great, but I try to say less I'm a politician than I'm a public servant. you have to have a little politics in you to do. And I do love the strategic political side of it too. I'm in no rush. So if anybody has any other questions, let me know. Clearly, I like to talk.
Yeah. I like that you were just talking about how you had two kind of very out of the box people run before. And I mean, I guess maybe this goes back to balance, but I mean, is there a way to kind of keep your private and your family life private when you're running for office? Or are you kind of forced to like make that a part of your campaign and a part of you as a official?
It's a good question. I think it's a personal decision. I really do. The other outside the box, he didn't make a big deal out of it. In fact, I didn't even really know. And some people do. I think for people who have more traditional backgrounds, it's kind of expected. Like everybody said, oh, the first thing you need to do is go take a picture of you and your beautiful family, right? Well, that's great because I have a beautiful family to take a picture of, but and they didn't mind. But I think you can keep it. I think you can keep it private. I mean, obviously, in small towns, people know who you are. The kids' friends knew. But you'd be surprised. I bet if you met somebody from Wakefield tomorrow, they'd have no idea who their selectmen is, who their counselors are. I mean, unfortunately, a very small amount of people really, really pay attention. So I think you don't, yeah, I don't think you have to worry. And I certainly don't think, at least in Wakefield, nobody has ever called out any, outside of a few really kind of nasty situations. Most people don't care about people's religion or sexual orientation. I just don't think it matters. They're all very, very good counselors and very diligent and really care about Wakefield. And they got elected because I think we have this kind of changing base of demographics who listens to the issues and not to the things that don't matter to us.
Awesome. Well, does anyone have any final questions before we kind of wrap it up? Lynn?
Hi. So I apologize if somebody asked this before I got on because clearly I was late. And please stop me if somebody has asked this question. But how do you suggest that people become involved in their local government? And like, where are the areas that you think that that citizens can have the most impact?
It's a very, very good question. I think, we've talked about elections and all of that. You don't have to be an elected official to get involved in your government. So, and if we were saying involved from kind of serving, there are so many appointed positions in all of these towns. And then there's just a lot of volunteer positions. We talked about PTOs. Even if you're not, we have a human rights commission, so people get appointed to that. But even if you don't want to get appointed or you want to see what it's all about, you can just go to the meetings. And these days on Zoom, you could, a smorgasbord, you could try every meeting in town and figure out who's on it and what you like. So there's always appointed positions. Some people don't want to do the campaigning, which is perfectly fine. There's so much impact you can have. Kind of on the flip side of it, from an advocacy standpoint, we talked a little bit about, writing public officials and participating in meetings, but we have a local newspaper here that people we have a daily, we're pretty unusual that we have a daily newspaper, writing letters to the editor. I mean, these small daily papers, even weekly papers, are desperate for content. You can write a letter to the editor. You can write a thought leadership piece on that, send it to the patch at the same time. You triple your, you kind of triple your audience. Social media, I do find a little trickier to kind of engage in advocacy. Community pages tend to devolve pretty quickly. It's been on them. But I think, just going and talking, going to people's office hours, going to the meetings, and I think pick an issue that you care about. And there's always, there's always other groups too that are maybe aren't in government. So like we have a Sustainable Wakefield group here in town for people who really care about the environment. You don't have to be a member of the town environmental committee. You can be a part of the grassroots, and then they get involved, and they're super, like, we couldn't do what we do on our environmental town, our kind of official government environmental committee without the work of the grassroots committee. So there's all of these kind of synergies that are going on around town. So, you know, and the thing is, we have a new community garden. I think people who just use the community garden are engaged citizens, right? I mean, it's amazing. So.
Awesome. Well, Julie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to the group tonight. Yeah, we are actually recording all these sessions and are going to make them available to all the Junior League members, since we like to keep these groups small, so everyone can listen in and get some value out of this. And you are